for farming have been around for a long time. There's actually documents that go back talking about cover crops for more than 3,000 years, used in agriculture and farming. They were used in China. In the rice fields, they would plant a certain type of vetch to alternate with their rice crops to rejuvenate the soil. In Southeast Asia, where they grow tea, they would alternate that with soybeans. Soybeans are great. They're a great source of their legume, the great source of nitrogen, putting nitrogen back in the soil. So this has been going on forever. And I can tell you, I was at the fair and I talked to farmers because I'm interested in getting to know what they do. What do you do? So I ask a lot of the farmers, do you use cover crops? And they'd say, yeah, I do. And I'd say, what do you use? And some of them said, all these whole list of really good things, more modern things to use. But for the most part, it was like, I grow soybeans and corn. Corn is really known for depleting the soil. It sucks the nitrogen out of the soil. It requires a lot of water. It's really hard on your soil. So a lot of the farmers in this area, you'll see, they'll rotate crops. One year they'll grow corn, the next year they'll grow soybeans, because soybeans will get their soil repaired and then they'll grow their corn again. Besides the fact that soybeans aren't just for that, they're actually a crop that they can use, a cash crop. So they'll alternate that. So that's a little bit about farming for cover crops. But we're going to be talking about mostly using it in your home garden. Yes, you have a question?
I noticed I live right across from Piper Farms. They lease it. But I noticed one year they grew turnips over the winter. They didn't do anything with them except till them in the spring.
Yep.
And then whenever they grow pumpkins, about probably 50% of their pumpkins are just left in the field to get tilled in.
Yep.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, the turnips are a possible cover crop. They are probably deliberately planted. And the things that have deep roots like that, we'll talk about some examples of that, is they will, if you have heavy soil or soil that has a lot of clay, those things with the big heavy roots will break up the soil. So it reduces soil compaction, and it also provides channels for water to get down deeper into the soil.
On the pumpkins, part of the reason for that is because who they sell them to require them to be a certain size. So when they pick them, you've seen those great big boxes. Yeah, they need to be a certain.
I just thought maybe they were putting some kind of nutrients back in the soil.
Yeah, well, anything that composts, and we'll talk a little bit about that, takes a while, but it will put nutrients back in the soil. So we're going to talk about how that works. Pumpkin is not one of the suggested cover crops specifically, but, pumpkins have seeds. I would think that they may have to worry about those reseeding. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess they have to make enough profit out of the ones, like she said, the ones that are larger. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's talk about the specific benefits. These are the main benefits here, and I tried to list them in order of what I feel is probably people's priorities with enriching their soil. So personally, my number one interest in planting cover crops in my garden is to put the nitrogen into the soil. That way you cut down on fertilizers. It's actually less expensive. So that's my main purpose. If you're thinking about cover crops, think about this list and try to prioritize, maybe just pick 2 or 3 of these things that are important for your soil. If you don't compost, I compost, so I have plenty of organic matter. I'm always adding compost to my soil. If you can't compost or you don't compost, there are certain cover crops that will put organic matter into your soil. So that may be one of your priorities. Like we said earlier, suppressing weeds. You don't want weeds to grow in your garden at any time, over the winter, over the summer. So having the cover crop there does keep the weeds down. So that's a good thing. Like Valerie said, erosion control, especially with some of these broadleaf type cover crops, it keeps those pouring down rains from washing your bare soil away. So that's another purpose you might have. If you have a slope and you're worried about your soil washing down the hill, a cover crop that's good for slopes, something that prevents soil erosion will be a good choice for you. So what you choose is going to depend on what you need, what your garden is, and what it's like. Improving soil structure. Soil is like an aggregate. It has sand and different clays and different things, and they have a certain formation. So planting cover crops helps to keep the soil structure good for planting other crops. We're not going to get into the science of how that happens, but that's something that they do. They will also help hold the moisture because they're covering the ground and they're shading it so it doesn't dry out as much. And then some of the added benefits that aren't even related to soil is there are several cover crops that will attract pollinators. So we'll talk more about which ones those are too. So if you're really into saving the bees and attracting pollinators, you may choose to have a cover crop that does that blooms. Some of them will manage pests. Some of them have some kinds of chemicals that they produce into the soil that will help with nematode problems or other pests or insects, and some even help with some diseases. And also, if you want your garden to provide food year round, there are winter cover crops that you can still harvest all winter long that you can eat and provide food for your family, so you're not wasting a section of your garden by not having anything to eat for that period of time. So those are just some of the benefits. Okay, so there's basically two different times to plant cover crops, although there is one that can be planted in the summer that we'll mention later. So you can plant, there's spring cover crops and there are fall cover crops. So spring cover crops are usually something that you plant in early spring when it's still cool. Give them a few weeks to grow, and then you cut them all down and let them decompose. The important thing is to make sure that you have allowed enough time for the sufficient decomposition of those materials. And there's some that decompose faster than others. So if you don't have enough time, if the stuff is laying down there and it's still green and hasn't decomposed, then you can't plant yet. So you have to make sure that you terminate it or cut it down early enough. And we'll talk about different ways of terminating in a minute. Another option is you wait till after the frost, and then you put your seed out, and it just lays there over winters in the soil. It just lays there till spring, and then it will sprout. And that way you don't have to worry about the timing as much. And then again, before you're 2-3 weeks before you're ready to plant, you need to terminate that. So those are spring cover crops. Most of what we're talking about today, since it's coming up on fall, are going to be fall cover crops. That's the meat of my presentation here. So fall cover crops you plant right around now. Usually through September. There's some that can be planted even into mid-October, depending on what it is. So you plant when the summer temperatures are starting to get cooler. Might not quite be yet, but I don't know, it hasn't been too bad. And then let them germinate. So you're not waiting till after the frost, you're letting them grow now. So you let them grow in the fall, and then you can either cut them down before, after the frost, or you can just let them lay on the ground and just decompose naturally. So if they're winter killed, if they're not winter hardy, they will winter kill, then they just lay on the ground all winter and decompose on their own. It's kind of a more natural thing to me. There may be some crops that don't die over the winter, that they stay alive. And if that happens, then you'll have to go ahead and do the same thing you do with the spring ones, and a couple, 3 weeks, I would say at least 3 weeks before you're ready to plant, go ahead and terminate those. So those are just some different options for fall cover crops. Okay, so of course, like anything that you want to do in your garden, it requires a little bit of thinking ahead and planning. So this is just one example of how you could plan a crop rotation with your food crops and your cover crops. So I found this picture, so I made up an example. This is a strip gardening rotation. If you have enough room in your garden and you want to have all parts of your garden remain productive all year round. So this is like a little picture. They have some kind of little orchard over there. Of course, you can plant, if you have orchard and trees, you can plant a cover crop on the ground below those. I mean, clover is a cover crop, and that's a good one to have under trees because it can take some shade and it puts nitrogen in there that'll benefit those trees. So next to that, they have I'm saying they're their winter vegetables. Kind of hard to tell. So they're growing some winter vegetables in this stretch here. And next to that, they may have a winter cover crop. They could be growing some kind of a grass or a mixture in that next strip here. And then the last strip in this picture, it looks like they haven't planted anything. So what do you think? If it was you and you had this strip of land right here and you had to decide what to plant in there, what would you plant?
Without knowing the soil conditions?
You can make some assumptions.
Okay.
What would you plant?
What month is it?
It's fall.
Oh, okay. Berry patch.
A berry patch?
That's what they do with mine.
You are?
And they,
Yeah, that's usually more of a permanent thing. I have a lot of berries too, so, but you could. If you were gonna plant something here in the winter, if you were alternating and you have winter vegetables and then you have a cover crop, you would alternate and you would plant some kind of a winter vegetable here. What do you think?
Would you not want to do more like the shrubs that you have?
You could, yeah. Cabbage is a winter vegetable. It looks like they have cabbage here.
I plant short-term fall vegetables like radishes, peas.
Okay, and radishes are a cover crop also. So, and peas are a cover crop also. So you could do that.
First.
Yeah, but that's why I just said there's cover crops that you can eat. So that's a double whammy there.
Could you do more of the like shrubs or something like that you have on the other side?
Sure you could. So this is what sticks out at me. This is kind of unrelated, but what sticks out at me is the fact that there's a road right here. And what happens on a road in winter if it snows? Salt. So if it was me, the first thing that would come into my mind is to plant a winter crop here that's salt tolerant. Do you know what a winter crop is that's salt tolerant?
I have to look it up.
All right. I'll tell you some examples. Beets, kale, and spinach are all crops that are salt tolerant. So that's just kind of a little side conversation there.
Did you say beet scale and what?
A spinach, yep. And I do grow spinach. I don't grow beets and kale. I'm not a big fan of kale. I know it's very nutritious, but I don't know. I've just never really
Put in smoothies.
gotten attached to it. Huh?
Put in smoothies with pineapple, you can't taste it.
Smoothies with pineapple? Yeah.
You get the health.
I do the smoothies. Yeah. I usually put fruit in them. But
Or blueberries, that way you get the fruit, you get the health kick.
yeah, I do put blueberries in them. That is one of my favorite, blueberries are my favorite fruit. There's just, no question, it's my favorite
What
fruit.
is?
Blueberries.
Would kale be the same family as the pan?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
What
It's
do the
a,
sheep
it's
eat?
a,
What do the sheep eat?
I don't know.
Do they
I don't have sheep, so
take care of the weeds? Cute.
goats would take care of the weeds for sure. They would eat everything.
They take care of the whole crop.
Okay, so now you got to think, if you're going to get seeds, do you want to get a mix of different cover crops like the ones I gave you here? Or would you prefer to have it be homogeneous, all the same crop?
I want all the same.
You want all the same? Why?
Because I'm just very OCD about.
Well, you're going to have to pick through those seeds and separate them.
Throw it in an area that I don't have to look at it.
So advantages and disadvantages. One of the big advantages of a mix is they are almost like companion plants to each other. So in this example here, you have peas and oats. So the grains will grow faster and they will provide, grow faster in there. So they'll grow up first. And then the peas will come along and they're a legume and they will put nitrogen into the soil. So that's a kind of a symbiotic, a companion planting situation. Another good reason is maybe your soil isn't the right kind of soil for something in that mix. And you have a mix of things, and if you only have one of that and your soil isn't right for that, unless you already know, then and none of it grows, you've wasted all of it. But if you have a mix, hopefully at least something or some of those seeds will grow. So you can, and then you can observe, you can say, oh, I see that my Austrian field peas did really well, but this other one didn't do so great. So maybe next time I'll think about planting a mix of only the things that are doing well. So it's an experiment. It's an experiment with your own garden, your own soil. The other example here of a cover crop is buckwheat. We'll talk about buckwheat later, but this is a summer cover crop. So if you have a garden where you grow, say, lettuce. I grow a lot of lettuce. Mostly I grow it indoors nowadays, but I do grow a lot of lettuce because I eat a lot of salad. So if you grow lettuce, lettuce doesn't like hot weather. It will bolt. There are some that have been bred to be heat resistant, but in general, it doesn't like hot weather. So the idea of doing something like this is you would plant your lettuce in the spring, and then when it gets hot and your lettuce doesn't do well, you remove it and you plant your buckwheat because it likes the summer. And then after your buckwheat grows, you cut it down, let it decompose into the soil, and then when you're ready, you plant your lettuce or your fall crop again. So that's an example of a different kind of rotation. Those summer cover crops tend to do better being planted not in a mix on their own. So another example, soybeans are a summer cover crop, and they do better. Soybeans and buckwheat do better on their own as a single crop. So those are just some options. Of course, it's your garden. It's all up to you, and the whole thing is one big experiment. Believe me.
Are there seeds that like kind of like not single but not mixed, like maybe coordinating a number of things with it, like a lot of different grasses or certain types of things like that?
There's all kinds of mixes. You could always buy the individual seeds and make your own too. If you had, like I said, if you found out that Austrian field peas and one of the other things, oats, did well in your garden, then you could just buy those singly and mix them up and do it your own way. It's all up to you. You gotta find out what works for you in your garden. Okay, how to plant them. Okay, so if you're planting legumes, and we'll talk about all the legume things later. Some examples: the beans, the peas, the clovers. Those seeds need to be inoculated. And what it means to be inoculated is they are putting those nodules on those legumes have a certain kind of bacteria, rhizomial bacteria present that makes them able to do their job. And if that bacteria isn't present, they can't work properly. So when you get legume seeds, they're either pre-inoculated or you're going to have to inoculate them yourself. If you're buying things in bulk, they may be not inoculated. So they actually sell a powder that you have to mix up with water by its directions and put those seeds into the water just before you're planting that will inoculate them. Now, the packet that I've given you today are pre-inoculated. That's how they were advertised. So they are already coated with the bacterial stuff, so you don't have to do anything with them. So that's important if you're buying seeds, to pay attention to whether or not they're not pre-inoculated or that you're going to have to do it yourself. Okay, so when you plant your cover crop seeds, lightly turn the soil. I usually just kind of scrape the surface to give it a rough surface. I'm not a big fan of tilling, digging things up. For many reasons, the main one of which is the ground nesting bees that I don't want to disturb. So those bees have gone home in the fall. They're under the ground in their nest. And if you start digging them up, then you're going to disturb them. So I just, lightly scrape the surface, whatever. Be careful in case there are any bees hibernating there. And then most cover crops are really small seeds. And the smaller the seeds are, the less deep they have to be planted. So the directions for those that I gave you said to broadcast them on the surface of the soil. Well, If you look, and so you won't have to open your packet. I brought some in a jar that I'm going to pass around, and you will notice that there are all different sizes of seeds in here. And bigger seeds tend to need to be planted deeper than small seeds. So the really big round ones in there are your Austrian field peas, as you'll see. And I'm just going to say how I would do it, and I'm going to say how it's recommended to do. So you'll find out my way is easier if you have a small space. So generally, they recommend that you take and separate all of your large seeds and your small seeds. Probably an easy way to do that, I would think, would be to use a colander. You use a colander and put all the seeds in it and shake it around, and all the smaller seeds will fall through, and then you're left with the bigger seeds. Plant the bigger seeds first. Usually, 3/4 of an inch to an inch about for the larger seeds. Plant those first, and then cover them up, and then broadcast your smaller seeds evenly on top of that. That's one way to do it. To me, I don't know, I'm kind of a lazy gardener, I guess, in general. To me, it's easier if I'm just doing my raised beds to broadcast all the seed and then go around and look for those big seeds and poke them down into the soil. So that's what I did. And it works for me. But you can do it your own way, however you want to do it. In general, the larger the seed, the deeper it needs to be planted. So the seeds that you're looking at are the seeds that are in your envelope, but I didn't want you to have to open your envelope and spill them or anything. Everybody saw them? So this is what you're getting. So the tiniest seeds in here are the clovers. And then there's different kinds of grains in here, and some, your legumes, your Austrian field peas, which I have planted before, and they are awesome.
Does clover reseed itself?
It can, yes.
In my experience, it hasn't done well.
Yeah.
It hasn't done well in my experience.
Yeah, it'll be kind of lame when it reseeds.
It doesn't do well. Not to reseed itself. No.
The
first year is wonderful.
Yeah.
Second year is okay. The third year.
Yeah.
But it's not like white clover. It won't suck. It won't.
No,
not for my.
It's an annual. Your regular white clover in your lawn is perennial. Right. But the cover crops that we recommend for clovers are annuals, so meaning they will winter kill. Huh?
All my clover's gonna die. I have to replant it.
Yeah. But that's what you want it to do. The point of cover crops is to kill it.
To my lawn.
Oh, the ones in your lawn that are white clover should survive. Do you want them to survive?
Huh?
Do you want them to survive?
Yeah.
Okay. I do. A lot of people, I have neighbors that try to kill all the clover, and they don't like it too much that I like to have clover.
Clover.
Yes, I do too. So.
It's so much softer.
But the kind that you plant in your lawn is generally a perennial, so it'll keep coming. And it stays green all winter.
Honeybee Max at what seed is called Honeybee Max.
Oh, really? Cool.
I hope
At Clark's.
Yeah, I want to go up there because our master gardener Zoe informed me that they have a lot of cover crop seeds up there.
Yeah,
so
do.
I haven't.
And they sell the inoculant too.
That's a little bit of a drive for me. Yeah.
Online, there was a message. Stephen said, "I love the clover. My backyard is mostly that and wild strawberries. The bunnies love it."
Yep. Yeah, my backyard is mostly clover too, and I like it too because I have dogs, and the dogs, what they do out there doesn't bother the clover. It will, make spots on the grass, but it doesn't bother the clover, and the clover stays green all winter, and it doesn't need to be mowed as much because it doesn't grow as high, and it attracts pollinators. So to me, it's a win-win. It improves your soil because it's a legume. So, the people who want to get rid of all the clover and only plant grass, they're not doing the earth very much of a favor. So anyway, as far as watering, when you first plant it, it recommends to water it every couple weeks pretty heavily. And after that, you can cut back on watering. And once it's established, it shouldn't need to be watered at all. It should be fine with just normal rainfall. So it's pretty easy care.
It says mulch, so like after you put the seeds, you don't have to put mulch over that?
I put straw on mine.
So, okay.
That's just to keep it from, if the rain hits it, from washing around, washing away, the birds eating it, weeds popping up while you're waiting for the seeds to grow. So I use straw. That's what I always use in my garden for mulch.
Do you shred your straw first, or you just put straw down?
No, I just put straw down. Like I said, I'm a lazy gardener. Now my husband makes he has a little chipper, little mini chipper. So he'll use, like, if we have a dead branch or something, he'll use the chipper to make the mulch that goes in my front. But I'm pretty much going mulch free in the front landscaping, which is weird to everybody but me. But I have a lot of native plants that have spread in there. I have some phlox subulata, the low growing phlox, which is native, and some native violets appeared in there, and they've pretty much overtaken a whole huge section of my front landscaping, and I love them.
Wild strawberries well too, but they like shade.
Well, there's wild strawberries, and then there's the ones that are the mock strawberries. So you have to make sure you know the difference between them. Mock strawberries are not the ones that are you can eat them, but they don't taste good. I mean, and those are actually an invasive weed. But they have the yellow flowers. They're not wild strawberries, they're mock strawberries. I have mock strawberries at my house. At my house in Canada, I have wild strawberries out in the field. They have a white bloom. So that's really the main way you can tell them apart. Okay, so now we're talking about terminating them. So it doesn't matter what your growing zone is for doing this, because for the most part, what we're going to be talking about is annuals, and they're going to die anyway in the winter. I think it's better for them to die in the winter because they're doing the work for me, and I don't have to worry about going out there and chopping them down or killing them because they killed themselves over the winter with the frost. So I prefer some that do that. The other things you can do if they don't die, you can use plastic sheeting, black plastic sheeting, or clear plastic sheeting to smother them. I prefer using cardboard. So you can put, if they don't die, you can put a layer of cardboard on top of them, put a little mulch or a little layer of soil on top of that, and that cardboard will compost. So you won't have to go back and remove anything. So that's another, lazy gardening tip. You put the cardboard down, and then you let nature take care of that. So chop and drop. This is actually a picture from my garden. This is my crimson clover. Like I said, I have raised beds. So this was my crimson clover that I terminated in the fall by chop and drop. So I just cut it all back and left it laying on the surface of the soil. So that's a no-till method. It'll make a nice mat there. And even if that mat stays there over the winter into the spring, you can just plant your plants right through it. You just, plant right through it and leave it lay there. It will continue to improve your soil. If that's not practical for you, if you don't have enough time, or you just don't want to let it lay there, or you don't like the way it looks or whatever, you can use a till method. So a till method, you basically cut it down the same way, but then you turn your soil over and work it into the soil in some way, with some kind of tool, or depending on the size of your garden. A disadvantage of that, again, is disturbing bees. And also, a lot of these cover crops work to improve your soil structure and put break up the soil and put the water channels in there. And when you dig it up, you're undoing everything that those crops did. So that's another reason I don't like the till methods. If you're in a big hurry, that may be something that you just really have to do, because once they're chopped up and tilled into the soil, they're going to decompose faster. So that's really the only advantage to doing that I can think of. So that's and the whole purpose of having a cover crop is for it to die and go into your soil. It's not to keep it around. Okay, so now let's talk about the types. This is the legumes, like we've mentioned a few times. Their main purpose is they are nitrogen fixers. They will fix your nitrogen depleted soil by putting nitrogen back into it. And this image over here that I found, this is the root of a soybean plant. And you can see the little nodules, and down here there's a little close-up of it. Those nodules the plant will take nitrogen out of the air into the plant, and then these little nodules down here will release it into the soil. They will change it from the kind of nitrogen that's in the air to a form that can be used by plants. Okay. So that's the main purpose of legumes. That's why it's a great thing to alternate with corn, because corn will suck the nitrogen right out of your soils. Corn needs a lot of nitrogen. I tried growing.
People use hairy bags. I have a whole few list of it's god awful.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too. We're going to talk about that specifically. I have it in Canada. There's some reasons for it. It's good for slopes because it spreads, it vines like this, and it's really good for erosion control. It also puts nitrogen in the soil, so it's good for the soil, but it just has its purposes. Now, putting it in my raised bed, I probably wouldn't do that. See?
It's the negative that I've heard that about nitrogen.
A negative of nitrogen?
Yeah.
Well, nitrogen is one of those things that it doesn't stay. You know, it's something that it's not like phosphorus that you put in your soil and it's going to stay there. It's there and then it's gone. So that's why when you get a soil test, you can't measure it. The only negative I can think of for me is if you have too much of it, like if you use a high nitrogen fertilizer, you can burn your plants.
I think you're thinking of phosphorus. Phosphorus is something that runs off into the waterway.
Yeah.
That's more detrimental.
But nitrogen, too much nitrogen will burn your plants. That's a problem. That's the reason dog pee burns your grass, because it has urea in it, and urea is nitrogen. So its main component is nitrogen. So that's why, like, if you do a soil test, they can't test how much nitrogen's in your soil, but they will tell you to put nitrogen in your soil. They will tell you to buy urea, and put it into your soil. So, there's that. Another disadvantage of nitrogen is, like, say you're trying to grow a crop like tomatoes or something that needs to fruit. If you give it too much nitrogen, it will produce a lot of green leaves and get all bushy and fluffy. And that will actually, the energy goes into that, and it will reduce the amount of fruits that you get and blooms. So those are the only two things off the top of my head I can think of that might be a bad thing about nitrogen. But in this case, we're not talking about that kind of nitrogen. We're talking about a plant that naturally puts nitrogen into the soil. So there's no bad side of this one.
Kathleen Baker said that if we could speak up while asking the questions, they would appreciate that online.
Right. I'll try to remember to repeat them. Sorry. Megan, you can repeat them if I can't, because I know you can project. Yeah, our speaker system in here isn't working, so we're only using the speaker on my laptop. So I'm sorry, guys, if you can't hear what everybody says. Remind me to repeat the questions. So what she had asked was, what are the detrimental things about nitrogen? So that's what we were discussing. So anyway, this is a short list. This is not at all of the legumes. There's lots and lots of them. And I put clover there because all these different clovers are nitrogen fixers, and these are the annual clovers. Your packet, I believe, has crimson and berseem in it. And we'll talk about the details of those later. I'm happy I've done more research on the berseem, and I think that sounds like a good one for me. So I'm probably going to get more of that. Austrian field peas, we'll talk about those in a minute. I have grown those. And I don't think anything else on this list I have grown on purpose. Like I said, the hairy vetch we do have on our property in Canada, so which is fine with me.
Is hairy vetch, like, is that a sedge? Like in
No.
the grass family? No. Okay.
And I believe it's something that livestock can eat, right, Megan? Don't livestock eat hairy vetch?
I think so.
Because a lot of these things, like farmers that'll grow them, sometimes their purpose.
Hay.
Sometimes farmers will grow some of these things, and their purpose is they're going to let their livestock graze on it also. So they want something that has dual purposes. Always good for something to be better for more than one thing. So we're gonna drill down to some of these specifically, and you'll see pictures of them also. So Grass and grains, I kind of put those together because when you research it, sometimes they call them a grass and sometimes they call them a grain and sometimes they're one or the other and sometimes they're both. So I just put them all together. Their main purpose is they grow quickly. They are the best for adding biomass, which is the same thing as compost, basically. They're adding organic matter to the soil. When you cut them down, they decompose. They are very, very good at increasing the organic matter in your soil. So that is the main benefit. Like I said, if you don't compost and your soil needs more organic matter, you know, for a vegetable garden, you want to keep it around 6%. So if you do a soil test and your soil test comes back and says that your organic matter in your garden is only 3%, that's fine for a lawn. It's a little low for your garden. So if you want to increase the organic matter, this will help. And they also grow pretty densely, so they are great for suppressing those weeds. So this is a little list. These, I believe, are all annuals. So what you want to do is not plant perennial grasses in your garden because that's what's in your lawn. You don't want it to keep coming back. Yes.
Online, Anita said, I have grown fava beans.
Yes.
We love them and added raw to salads and cooked, added to stews, soup, etc. But this year was their first time. Their crop was very poor.
Really?
The drought.
Try replanting them as a fall crop. I would do that. So yes, fava beans is another one of those beans that is a legume that will put nitrogen into your soil. And the side effect is that you can also eat them. So side effect. The side benefit, I should say. So this is a list of different, this is not everything. There's a lot more possibilities. So this is what I thought of as only the basic annual grasses and grains for your home garden. So the other category is, which is also overlap, I'm calling it brassica and broadleaf. And we talked about this a little bit before when we talked about things like kale. So these are good. A lot of them have really deep roots. And so they will help if you have clay soil or whatever, it'll break it up. If you have compacted soil, I have raised beds and I don't till them, but I notice every year the soil gets a little bit lower, and that's because it gets compacted over time. So planting some of these things in your garden will help break up that soil and reduce the compaction. They prevent erosion because most of them have bigger leaves. You know, grasses and things like that don't have as much spread, like little umbrellas. So the leaves of some of these plants will keep the rain from off of your soil. So they do help prevent erosion. And they suppress weeds because they also, if those big leaves also provide shade, so you have less chance of weeds coming up underneath in shade. So this is another list. I have planted kale, but like I said, it's not really one of my favorite foods. Mustard, that's what's in the picture there. It's so pretty. I like all the yellow flowers. Also attracts pollinators. Radishes are good. So there's several different kinds of radish that I've heard about. I don't know if all of them are good for home gardens. The popular one now is the daikon radish we'll talk about later, and that's in your packet there. There's also an oil seed radish, and they also call them tillage radishes because they're used for cover crops, and when they're used for cover crops, they call them tillage radishes. So you might hear that term sometimes too. Spinach I do grow. Chard I have grown, Swiss chard. Turnips, somebody mentioned turnips earlier at Pfeiffer. Those are a brassica cover crop.
They were coming out of the soil.
And you can see how they would break up the soil. So if your soil is compacted or dense, that will help. And my husband likes to eat turnips, so I mean, he always asks for.
They were too big. By the time I seen them, figured out what they were like gigantic.
Yeah. I grew up in the South, so we had, rutabagas was one of the things. So flax, I do have some flax seeds. I'm planning on planting those. Canola, of course, these last things on the list, canola, rapeseed, very similar plants, mostly used for producing like cooking oils and things. They grow a lot of canola in Canada.
What's your opinion And comfrey, I have a thing on comfrey that says the biomass that it makes is.
Really? I don't know. Do you know anything about comfrey?
No, but you want to repeat her question?
She asked about what we knew about comfrey. If anybody online knows about it, it's not something I'm familiar with. So if you know any information about comfrey, if you could type that in the text box, that would be good.
I have a brochure on it that it tells you about how the amount of biomass that it puts in the soil, like
Okay.
potash and nitrogen and everything.
Okay.
And
She's-
beautiful pollinators.
She says that it's good for biomass. So if anybody knows about that, I do not know about that, and I didn't come across that in my
It's
in
hard
my
to find.
materials.
But
Okay.
it's also can take over your garden in a very short period of time.
Is it an annual?
Perennial.
Oh, it's a perennial. Okay.
Yeah, you cut the leaves and use the leaves as a biomass.
Okay.
It's an herb, right?
Yeah.
I remember that the Master Gardeners years ago at one of their plant sales, someone was looking for that. So,
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Was it you?
No, I got some, but.
Yeah. Okay, so that is a list of another category of cover crops. So now, since we've talked so much about native plants, unfortunately, a lot of cover crops are not native, but they are annuals and they are killed. So they're not invasive, they are just not native. The only examples of native cover crops, if you're really, really a purist of native plants, are these grasses, a Canadian wild rye and a Virginia wild rye. So if you want to make note of that, and you want something that's native, those are the only things I could find. Everything else comes from somewhere else in the world. Okay, if your main goal is to help the pollinators, I put together this little list of things for you that you can grow, plant in your garden in the fall that will provide support for those pollinators. Because as we know, as fall progresses, you have less things blooming. That means less food, less nectar, less pollen, and there's still some bumblebees that are out through October. So if you want to plant a cover crop, but you also want to feed those bees, here are some things that you can plant that will provide nectar and pollen for the bees. Huh?
Alfalfa blooms?
That's what I've never grown it. Have you grown it? It blooms?
Oh my gosh, I never knew that. I thought it was just a grass.
Alfalfa. Is alfalfa an annual or perennial
So-
though?
You have to reseed it every so often.
Okay.
Like, there's fields around me where, they'll get sparse, like
It's
that
so
clover. Like the
veiny.
first year is great, second year not, like it goes down and they'll come back in and reseed after.
Yeah. So, but she's saying that what Megan was saying was that alfalfa will reseed and it'll kind of get less every year. But if you were planting it for a cover crop, it's probably one of those things that you would have to terminate. You would have to cut down or smother or whatever because you would want to kill it so that it will go into the soil. So pretty much to go into the soil, you need to kill them. So, but you wait, like for these, you can kill them after the pollinators have all gone into hibernation. So, which they'll do by the end of October. They'll go. So I'm big on clovers. And your package there has daikon radishes in it, so you have those. I don't think so, because I think Harry Vetch is a perennial, so it wouldn't be in there. I'm pretty sure that's not in your packet. Huh? Oh, is it? Okay. Sorry about that. They said it is in there.
I guess it'll go on the field.
Well, you know what? If you see it growing, you can always pull it out when it's little too. If you're not doing a really big space, that's the other advantage is having that you can pick and choose. I know there are daikon radishes in the packet. So this other one down here, Phacelia, I didn't know about that one, so I looked that one up, and it's supposed to be a really good for pollinators and have some really pretty purple flowers in addition. Okay, and then back to the story about things you can eat. So if you are really good at growing your own food, if that's really important to you, you may want to choose a cover crop that you can grow in your garden in the off season, but you can also eat it. So we talked about some of these: kale, of course, spinach, peas and beans, Soybeans you grow in the summer, so those are edible cover crop, but they're more of a summer cover crop. Radishes you can eat, and then barley. I didn't know barley was something that you could eat the part of. Did you? Have you ever eaten barley?
Barley soup.
I mean, I guess.
Barley
salad
soup?
or something like that.
Okay,
It's
yeah, I guess I have heard
one
of
of
that.
those healthy grain things.
Yep. So there you go. If you want to have healthy food all winter,
And it's gluten free.
yeah.
No.
Well, gluten-free just means it doesn't have wheat in it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. There's a question in the chat. Do you want me to ask now?
sure.
So the question in the chat, is there anything good to improve sandy soil?
As far as cover crops,
I think so.
I would probably just try to increase the biomass. So add, grow grasses and grains, because those are the best things for adding biomass. That's what I would do, because we've always said with composting that that compost will amend your soil by adding organic matter. Whether you have clay soil, it improves the drainage by making it more loamy so that water drains better. If you have sandy soil, which drains too fast, adding compost improves your soil by making it hold more water. So it's like the cure-all for both types of soil. So if your soil is sandy, you want to get more organic matter into that. So the best way to get organic matter is to grow some kind of grass or grain. Now, which grasses and grains grow best in sandy soil, I don't know. That's what you would have to look. If you're trying to choose a certain kind of grass, find one that says it grows better in sandy soil, and that will add your biomass. So
Water it to death.
And they wouldn't
We're
be
gonna have to do it.
well, if it's really too sandy, the water just goes right through. So that's the problem. So, okay, so now we're going to get into the specific details about what's in your packet and what it's good for. This is just, you can read this. I'm not going to read it to you. What kind of cover crop it is, when to plant it. Most of these things are fall, so most of them are going to be planted, now to the end of September. So those are the things it's good for, and there's some overlap. So this, even though it's a grain, it's also good for adding nitrogen. So some of them are and some of them aren't. It helps with phosphorus and potassium balance in your soil and all those other things it does. So this one may or may not die over the winter. So if it doesn't die over the winter, you can wait till 3 weeks before you're ready to plant, chop it down, cover it with cardboard, whatever, because you don't want it to stay. You want it to die so you can plant your spring crops there. This one is in your packet. I hadn't heard of this one, so of course I had to say, and start looking it up. But it turns out it's actually a hybrid. So this is something that was created by man in a lab. It wasn't a natural hybrid. They actually took sometimes they make hybrids. They take the best qualities of two different things and try to make something new out of it. So this is in your packet, and it is a hybrid of wheat and rye. So this can be a perennial or an annual, so you may have to kill it. It probably won't die over the winter. So again, this is something that's good for controlling erosion and suppressing weeds, breaking up your clay soil. So if you have really hard, hard soil, you can use that to loosen it up.
Here's another one.
Okay.
Question.
Yep.
From Amy, which cover crops have the deepest roots?
Well, probably the radishes. We'll get to the radish, but some of those radishes can have roots that go down 1 to 3 feet deep. Wow. So those are probably the best ones for deep roots that are breaking up the soil. Some of the grasses will also grow pretty deeply. So this one, I love the way these look. They're so pretty. The Austrian field peas, they are a legume, so they will help your lawn by, your garden. I had mine didn't do that well when I planted them before. The crimson clover did great. These didn't do that well, but I'm going to keep trying. You know, it could have been that it was at the wrong, I planted them too early, or I planted them too late, or at the wrong time. They do not like hot weather. These things will grow all winter. They do not like hot weather. So if you plant them and you have a hot day, they'll just wilt. They don't like it. So you can plant those now. I would probably wait till it cools off a little since it's been so hot. I'm probably going to plant mine, my cover crop mix around the first or second week of September. I'm going to wait a little bit because it has been so hot, and I don't want to plant it too early, but I don't want to plant it too late either. So there's that balancing point. And sometimes it may be that you have a mix. It may be that it's too early for some of the things in the mix and too late for the others, but it's a mix. So you got to make that judgment. I may do an experiment. I may plant some now in one bed and plant the rest the second week of September and see which way works best. So that's the other thing you can experiment with. Hairy vetch. So the package said it was a biennial, which means that it comes back for the second year and then it's done. So maybe when it peaches out.
That's what alfalfa is too.
A biennial? Okay.
We seed itself, right? A little seed pod to get on it.
Probably. I mean, a lot of things, if you don't kill them, that's why you winter kill them, so they don't reseed themselves. But if you want to just use it as a cover crop, just kill it, you know? I mean, they also, you know, I'm not a fan of Roundup. I don't use it. But you know, people do use it, and that is another way that you can terminate things. You can just
pull it up.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. There's disadvantages to that. And I've seen that recommended, but there's some disadvantages to that, and I'll tell you why. So anyway, this is it's very pretty. I like the way it looks. It spreads. It has these almost like vines that will spread around. So that's why it's really, really good for erosion control. So because it stops, if you have a slope and you want it completely covered, this will spread out and cover everything. So it's really good for that. It's really, really good for putting nitrogen into the soil. But you don't want, obviously, the last line in here, you don't want it to go to seed because it will keep going. If you want, you know, or you can, if you're up to it, you can try collecting the seeds. I don't know how hard it is to collect the seeds. If you have, yeah, and then you could save them and plant them in that.
It's beautiful, and the
Yeah.
pollinators love it.
Yes, they do.
But I keep it confined. I have a 1 acre field, so I keep it confined to
So just a
its
section.
area.
Yeah,
Because if
that's
not, it will choke everything out.
that's good. And you just leave it there year round. Okay. But if you're leaving it there year round, that's great for the pollinators, but it's not really doing the cover crop function. The cover crop
Oh, it's on
function.
the field, I don't
Yeah,
care. It's
yeah.
more there- it's
But you
more
see
for
the difference,
pollinators.
right? Yeah, you see the difference. Because
Yeah.
some of these crops can be used, like she says, for pretty and leaving the field. But if you're going to use it as a cover crop, you want to kill it.
So you could even do that before it flowers.
Yeah, you want to do it before it flowers. Or after it flowers, yes. Sorry. After it flowers, but before it goes to seed. Okay. These are the Daikon radish. I haven't grown these before. I don't eat radishes. It's another one of those things I'm kind of weird about. I know a lot of people put them in salads and things. That's what we were talking about. These are the best things for breaking up the soil because they have these long, deep tap roots. So they go really deep, and they can, you can eat those, but you can also eat tops when they're small. I don't have a picture of them when they're small, but they're like little sprouts. You can harvest those and use them as microgreens and put them in your salads. I love putting microgreens in my salads.
Are they bitter?
I don't know. When I've grown microgreens before, I don't remember what I've grown. I've grown them in pots, and I've had like all kinds of different ones, but I just, you know, I don't know.
But I mean, I don't know. I would just think that radish tops would be a little bit bitter.
Well, they're real small when you eat them, so they're like tender greens. So it's not the same thing.
Yay!
What?
Covered in raisins, it tastes delicious.
They said,
I know.
yeah, the comment was that, basically you want to eat something, put ranch dressing on it, and everything's good with ranch dressing on it. That's what my granddaughter does with the carrots. Huh?
Pesto out of all kinds of.
Pesto, yes.
Carrot tops,
Yep.
radish tops.
Awesome. Yeah, I love making pesto. I usually use, like if I'm growing basil and spinach, I usually use those in my pesto too. But you can use pretty much anything green. You can use parsley. I put parsley in it before. So pesto is one of those cool things you can make that use up whatever you have growing. Yeah.
Connie said she's really enjoying this presentation and can they get a copy of the slides?
Yeah, I'll send it to you after the, is she,
She's online, not in person.
but did she sign up for online? Because she should have gotten them.
I believe
Everybody who signed up for online should have gotten
she was a write-in.
oh, okay. All right.
Yes, she'll send.
I'll send them to you. If anybody's on Zoom, that signed up for in person, I will send you the handouts, later today when I get back to my computer, my other computer. So anyway, these daikon radishes are in your packet. And like I said, the main benefit of them is breaking up the soil, and they're also a legume. So they will put nitrogen in the soil. They are an annual, so you don't have to worry about it. You can eat them, you can eat the tops. So they're great to have. Another kind of cover crop, this is in the brassica family, is, the packet you have has what they described as green collards in it. When I looked that up, it says it's basically the same thing as kale. I don't know, there may be a difference. So that's in the brassica family, that is a crop you can eat. You plant them in the fall. It is a cool weather vegetable. So the advantages of them is that they put that organic matter into your soil. They also have some unique qualities of fighting pathogens in your soil, because they will release these biotoxin chemicals into the soil that will fight soil-borne pests. So that's another advantage of them. They're cool weather, but they don't survive the whole winter. So they will die by themselves. The advantage of that is you don't have to kill them, they kill themselves. So this is one of my favorites, crimson clover. I think it's so pretty. It's an annual legume, and like Megan said, it can reseed, it can grow back. If it doesn't get cold enough, if we have a really warm winter, there's chances some of this stuff will not be killed by the winter. So plant it in September. It's awesome for adding nitrogen to your soil. It also has the added benefit of attracting those late season pollinators. And like I said, it is really pretty. It's really pretty. And I did plant a lot of this at my house in Canada.
What's the
when I was
difference in
there.
that and red clover?
It's a different species. The red clover is really, to me, more purplish colored. This is more of a brighter red, and the flowers are longer, so they don't really look the same. So it's just a different species.
So I would know the difference.
Yeah, if you look at the flowers, you'll tell the difference. This is the one I'm anxious to try. So this is one that's really fast growing. So it comes up really fast, and it doesn't survive the winter. It's an annual. It does not like frost. So it'd be really easy. It grows low. You can plant it in fall and spring. Either way, you can do it as the spring, plant it, let it sprout, and then mow it down again. So you wouldn't have it for very long. It probably may not even have time to bloom. I don't know. But if you want it to keep it, you have to mow it before it flowers, because once it flowers, then it's done. It's one of those kind of things that's really short-lived. The really cool thing about this is another thing you can do when you're planting cover crops, like say it's September and you want to plant your cover crop, but your tomatoes still have green tomatoes hanging on them, and you don't want to pull those up yet. You can actually plant these just on the bare spaces below your other plants. and leave them there. You don't have to wait till the rest of your garden is completely gone to plant some. This is a great choice for doing something like that because it's low growing. You know, you don't want to plant something in your tomatoes that's going to be a tall grass that's going to shoot up and it's going to be in the way and block your tomatoes. So this is a good choice for planting what we call like overseeding. So you're going to put the seed where something's already growing. So that's what I would like to do with this. So this is one that I'm really anxious to try. Yellow mustard. This is something that's relatively new. It's kind of related to canola and rapeseed. It can be planted in the fall or the spring. It's gotten a lot of promotion, I've read. So it's more one of those more new things. So it is a perennial. So that's also in your packet. So if you don't want it to keep growing, you will have to kill it, you know, before you plant. So you can plant that now, or you can plant it in the spring. It's good. It also has a deep taproot, so it's also really good at loosening compacted soil. So that's one that also has a deep root.
Isn't there a mustard?
There's a mustard that's kind of like an invasive, but it's not this one. It's a different one.
You
So
wouldn't be giving us that.
I hope not. I wouldn't on purpose. That's the reason. Actually, that's a good thought. She said I wouldn't give it to him on purpose. That's the reason we have to have these labeled the way they are, because the USDA requires that, you know, the contents are clear on the packages of things we give out to make sure that you're not getting in it something invasive or something bad. So you know what it says on there is what you got according to the company. I haven't added any extra stuff. It's just what the company says. So if you have a problem with it, it goes back to the company and the name of the company's on there. So, so these have recently, they've made some discoveries at how these have been really good. They're still doing research on reducing those pathogens in the soil. So if you're having a lot of problems with you know, plants dying because your soil has, you know, nematodes or other pests in it, or some kinds of fungus or pathogen, things that are remaining in your soil, these will help fight that. So this is another one that has really deep roots. These will also go down 1 to 3 feet like the radishes do. Oats. Are oats in your packet? I think they are, aren't they? Yeah?
No.
No? Okay. Oats are a grain. I added these in here. They're a good cover crop. That's a cereal grain. That's good to plant either in the fall or in the spring, either way. They grow well when mixed in with legumes like your clovers or your radishes or things. It's a good companion for those. So these will die over the winter, and you can just leave them on the ground and let plant your plants through them, or you can mow them so they don't keep seeding. Those are oats.
Clark sells spring oats if you're into that.
Spring oats.
Yeah, they started carrying it this year called
Yeah.
spring oats.
Huh. I'm not sure I would choose that because of the size of my garden. It's so small. I prefer to have things that grow smaller. So
We did a cover crop of rye and some raised beds, and it was too much for our raised beds.
Yeah.
I just kept chopping and dropping, and then like it was just hard to kind of get through the rye.
yeah, Megan's saying that she planted rye in a raised bed and it was too much. So that's the choices you have to make. That's what I said. You try this mix and then you see, oh, this didn't work. This isn't going to work for me. This is too big, and then you just don't do it again.
Low growing. I
Yeah.
don't have to do nothing with.
Yeah. That's why I like that Berseem clover, you know. So buckwheat. This is one of the ones, this is the last one on my list. So I know time is running out here, or run out. This is one of the last one on my list. This is, Megan says she's planted this before, and it attracts lots and lots of pollinators. So this is one I would choose to plant between, like, say, lettuce crops or other fall. You have something that's a cool season crop, like your cabbage. If you plant the cabbage, and when it's done, when it gets hot outside and it's done, you can plant buckwheat in that spot to replenish your soil with the nitrogen, put the biomass and the nitrogen back into your soil, then cut the buckwheat down and then plant your fall crop. So I wanted to throw in an example of a good summer crop. Like we said earlier, soybeans. You'll see soybeans out there growing now. That's more of a summer one. So those are a couple examples. There's others out there. I didn't want to concentrate on those for this presentation because it's fall. So I wanted to really focus on things that were planted in the fall, but this is just to show you that you do have an option of having a summer choice of a cover crop. And on a final note here, this is not a perfect solution. It's not a cure-all to everything. There are some things you have to think about. Like I said, timing. If you don't get it at the right time, if you're going to try to get a crop and say you plant it too late and it starts to sprout and then it freezes, you don't get much out of it. If you plant it too early and it gets huge and you're like, I got to cut this down now, it's getting crazy, or it may be too hot and it may not grow because it's too hot if you plant too early. So there's a timing element in all of this, just like there is in any kind of gardening, really. It's all about planting it at the right time of year. There are some types of cover crops that do attract pests. So if you're getting ready to choose one, make sure that you investigate that and make sure it's not attracting some kind of thing you don't want to attract. Some of them are hard to kill. Like if you put a perennial out there, you may get it in your garden and chop it down and it just keeps growing back, in which case you may have to pull it. I read a book, which I didn't put in this thing because I really didn't. The author of the book was promoting, pulling the crops, and she was, saying, I like these and I don't like these, but it wasn't the same ones I like, so I'm like, I'm not using that. But the disadvantage of pulling things is that, you're trying to improve your soil and get your soil structure, and when you pull out that, you destroy all that work that was done. But if it's going to keep coming back, you may have to do that if you can't kill it any other way. So that's what you might have to do. So it may be difficult. Some may reseed, like we said, if you don't catch it at the right time, you don't mow it down proper time, it can reseed, it could spread to another place where you didn't want it to grow. So you're going to have to get rid of it. And they can become weedy, if like your hairy vetch, if you just let it go. So they can become weedy. And sometimes a lot of things I read about some of these are just like too much work. Like I said, I'm a lazy gardener. If it's going to be that much work, I'm going to choose something easier. So some of them are a little bit hard to grow. So you have to research all that after you make your choice. I think I want these because they put nitrogen in the soil. Which of these that put nitrogen in the soil are going to be best for me in my situation? How much work do I want to put in it? What chance do I want to take that it's going to spread somewhere and be a problem? So those are some things you have to think about. And that is the end. So again, like always, we want to remind you, sign up for our future workshops. We have one coming up September 12th on fall flowers. We also have one coming up on propagation in October, which is currently full. So we have a waiting list with about 4 people on it, but I'll send out an email asking if there's anybody who can't make it, and then people in the waiting list will move up in the order that I received their request. So
How do I get rid of
how do you what?
wiregrass and crabgrass?
Good luck with
I
that.
embrace it.
Crabgrass is really not that hard to pull. I have a special tool. It's got a
Pre-acres stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I was say, full of this.
Pre-emergence.
3 acres, come on, people.
pre-emergence in the spring. That's really all you can do. The stuff that, make sure you mow it before it goes to seed and put pre-emergence out in the spring.
Yeah. I just,
Or pull it.
I try to concentrate.
Wiregrass, nothing. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Wiregrass is here for life.
Consider it part of my law.
So we can get tested.
Well, anyway, the other things on here, the garden advice program, we're kind of winding down now, but if you have questions, we do have a team that will come out to your house and look at your problems and try to help you for $100. Well, we don't do the work, we just advise. So there's that. And then we have the helpline manned on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. If you have any kind of question, what's wrong with my plant, give us a call. The credits, I have given you a list of these, and those of you who are on Zoom that signed up in person, this is something I will also send you. There's not really that many this time. I've picked out the best, what I thought were the best.